Aloha artists, Miss Maggie here. Today we are going to look at patterns in nature, and by looking closely at the patterns in nature, we are going to be able to draw some beautiful, incredible trees, and then one of them we are even going to paint. So, to get started, these are the supplies that you're going to need from that packet of art paper that was sent home with you at the beginning of distance learning back in August. You need 2 pieces of paper, a drawing paper and a watercolor paper. You can notice that the drawing paper is smoother and that the watercolor paper has a texture and it's thicker. You will also need a pencil, you'll need a Sharpie, you'll need an eraser, and for painting, you are going to need your watercolor paints, a paintbrush, a napkin, and a cup of water. Make sure the cup of water is in something that has a large base so that it doesn't topple over easily, especially if you're painting near technology. Understand? Okay, go get your paper, small watercolor paper, small drawing paper, pencil, Sharpie, eraser, paints and paintbrush, water, and paper towel. See you in a moment. People around the world and across the ages have been inspired by the beauty of trees. They've looked at them closely, noticed how do they grow, and have made art out of them. We are going to do the same thing today. This is the pattern that you can find in almost any tree. Starting from the trunk, there are 2 lines that go in the same direction. Those lines are parallel to each other. That's what it means when lines are going in the same direction. So we start with parallel, parallel, and then we go apart, apart. Are you doing this with me? Do it with me. Parallel, parallel, apart, apart. And that makes some space in the middle, and that is where we put in the V. And then over here, you know what? There's 2 new parallel lines. Parallel, parallel, apart, apart. Put in the V. That's our pattern. Watch here how we can draw it on a real tree. On this native Iliahi tree, we can start with the trunk, which if you were to draw it would be 2 parallel lines. They're lines going the same direction. So watch how we have parallel, parallel, and then those lines of the trunk start to move away from each other, apart, apart. And then there's some space in the middle. After that, to put in the V. Right here is where we put in the V. Do you see how we have 2 new branches now? So those have new parallel lines. Parallel, parallel, and then those lines start to move apart, and then you can put in the V. Let's look on the other side. Ooh, I think there's a branch going behind or something, but we still have some parallel lines right there. And then let's move apart. And this one's going to go apart in that direction. And then let's put in a V there. And guess what? We're just going to put in another V. And on the tree grows. Okay, that's neat, isn't it? Let's try that out on our drawing paper, the thinner of the 2 papers. You can do your tree vertical and tall, or you can do it horizontal and wide. That is up to you. With your pencil, let's start near the bottom of the paper, and I'm going to start with those 2 parallel lines. They can be a thick trunk, they can make a skinny trunk, they can make a long trunk. It is up to you, but I have 2 parallel lines, and then I'm going to go apart, apart. And now I'm going to help those 2 parts become 2 separate limbs. And so, see how that is a new part of the tree, and that is a new part of the tree. I'm going to make this part longer. Parallel, parallel, and then it's going to go apart, apart, and I can again put in the V. Wow! I'm going to do the same thing over here. Parallel, parallel, apart, apart. Put in the V. Do you see how we have new sets of parallel lines there? These lines are parallel. I can make them longer. I can make them as long as I want. And then I can have them come apart, apart, and I can put in the V. And over here, parallel, parallel, apart, apart. Put in the V. Parallel, parallel, apart, apart. Put in the V. I can keep going and keep going. What do you think about that? Wow, look how that tree is growing. This is actually how trees are formed. They keep going taller and then they branch out. And so we have parallel, parallel, apart, apart. Put in the V. Oh, that one's getting very narrow. I'm almost done with that one. Let's do some of these others. Do you notice how the branches get narrow as you do more and more of this? That's neat, isn't it? At a certain point, when they're looking like sticks, then you can call that branch done. Okay, pretty close. Sometimes I put on another little bit there. This one here, have go up a little bit more, parallel, parallel, apart, apart, put in the V, parallel, parallel, apart, apart, put in the V. Oh, it's coming together. And sometimes I can have it actually go behind. Isn't that neat? So it went parallel and went behind. Now apart, apart, put in the V. Apart, apart, put in the V. Put in the V, parallel, parallel, apart, apart. Put in the V. Couple more here. And I have a tree, but it looks like it's on the mainland in the wintertime. There's no leaves on it. Let's give it some leaves. I'm not going to draw every single leaf though. Watch what I'm going to do. I am going to make an interesting shape, sort of like a cloud, but it's going to touch where the branches are. So the branches are disappearing into it, and this part has big bumps and little bumps, and it becomes a wonderful tree shape. I'm going to do another one here, and I'm going to go around both of those because they go together, but that one goes behind. And I always make sure that there are parts of the tree that the branches are disappearing into. Those ones needed something to disappear into, so I just gave it a little bit more there. And then sometimes parts are all by themselves. Now, isn't that fun? And I can add whatever else I want to the picture. And that is how I drew a tree. Now, this one here, if you think you made something amazing, you can color it, do whatever you want with it. If you're like, oh, that was challenging, I don't think I quite got it, that's all right. This was your practice piece. Practice it a couple more times, maybe on the back, so that you've got it. Because next, we're going to get out our watercolor paper and draw our final version. Before we do our final drawing and painting, I want to introduce you to some very special trees here on Maui. High up, above Makena, above Ulupalakua, high on the ridge of Haleakala, there is a place called Auahi. And a long, long time ago, that was one of the most amazing and special forests in all of Hawaii. It was a dryland forest, and the number of trees and plants that lived nowhere else in the world, oh my goodness. But at a certain point in time, people started cutting down the iliahi, the sandalwood, and then they brought in cows to use it as pasture, and new trees stopped growing. And so many of the trees had been cut down that it's not a forest anymore. However, there are old trees that have survived and are growing up out of the pasture. They're ancient and wise, and they're called Kumu trees, like teacher, because there's so much we can learn from them. That's not the only thing happening at Awahi. There is an amazing person, a friend of mine, Art Medeiros, who is bringing back the forest. He brings lots of people who also love the Aina and love planting trees up there, and they are very carefully planting so many trees and shrubs that will grow up and become not only big trees, but all the layers of the forest. And out of all those younger plants, still grow above them the Kumu trees that everyone has learned from along the way. So let's look at one of those trees and draw it. And if you liked one of the other trees that you just saw in the video, you could go back and pause the video on one of those. But if you want to practice the pattern along with me and see how I look closely at a photo and find the pattern in it to draw the actual tree, then that's what I'm doing next. Okay, let's get started. This is the tree that I'm going to draw. This Kumu tree is called Ohe. The Kumu trees are all different species because there's so many different types of trees at Awahi, but they're all old and we can learn from them all. I'm making my paper tall because this tree is tall. My paper is vertical. That will give me lots of space to draw. And now I'm going to look at the pattern of the tree. The trunk starts almost at the bottom of the paper, but not exactly, and I'm going to go parallel, parallel for that trunk. And then it's going to start to go apart, apart. And wow, there's 4 different branches there though. That's different, but I think 2 of the branches happened before the others, so I'm going to still do the same thing. I'm going to go apart, apart, put in the V, and then that branch there, it's going to have a very short parallel, and it's going to go apart, apart, put in the V, and there I have 4 of the branches right there. And then the other one, I'm going to make that go apart, apart, right away. And now I have those 4 branches that it starts with, just like that. This one's going to go up this way, parallel, parallel, and then apart, apart, put in the V, and this one is wiggling off to the right. It's great when you start to notice that the branches actually curve. Ooh, apart, apart, put in the V, and yes, that branch is hanging down. Do you see which branch that one is? And I'm going to draw the other branches, whatever direction they are going in, parallel, parallel, right off the page. And now this one here, it's going parallel, and it's curving to the side and parallel to the side here and up. And it kind of starts to create the personality of the tree. That was a long, wiggly parallel, but then it went apart, apart, and I put in the V, and those smaller branches still go parallel as well. This one's going along this way, parallel, parallel, apart, apart. Put in the V, and it goes again, and oh, that branch has a bit of a curve in it. Isn't that fun and tricky? Do you see where that happens in the photo? Really neat. But it just keeps going and getting smaller. I'm not worrying about the leaves yet, just doing these interesting, curvy, and amazing branches. Parallel, parallel, apart, apart, put in the V. I keep finding it, but I'm also looking at what makes this tree one of a kind. And if there's somewhere that gets tricky, like down here, it's hard to tell which branch goes to which. I just use my imagination and I try to think out what it is probably doing and go with that. So if your tree is not exactly like this tree or whatever tree you're looking at, that's fine. Just look closely and find the patterns as best as you see them. Keep going, keep noticing. Notice where the branches hang down. Notice where they reach for the sky. Notice what makes this tree beautiful. I am finding so many little details because I'm looking closely, and I'm finding all the interesting places where it wiggles and where it overlaps, and wow, this is so neat and fun. Keep going with yours. Make it beautiful. I think I'm just about there and ready for my leaves. Just a few more. Do you see those little ones reaching high up? I think I have to include those. Those are just so much fun that they are reaching for the sky and will have little tufts of green on them. Yeah, we'll have to include those. Okay, it's still just parallel, parallel, apart, apart, and put in the V. You can do it. Every so often I stop and I look. Well, what am I missing? Where do I need some more? I see that right there, it's missing some there. I'm trying to think, what shall I do with that? I think it's going over there and connecting up that way. But you know what? Sometimes the branches do just stop because they go into the leaves. And so now I am starting the canopy. That is what we call all of those leaves together. Make some interesting tree leaf shapes for your canopy. Don't make it so that it's all the same. Make this part interesting too. And sometimes there's a couple extra branches sticking out of the canopy as well. And so some of these parts go behind the branches. Some of them, the branches just disappear into them. This is definitely the fun and rewarding part. I'm making this into a tree. It's coming to life. It is sprouting life, and this is fun. There's those little tufts I was looking forward to. How is yours coming along? I bet it is amazing. If it turns into a different looking tree, then sometimes that's just how art goes. But I'm also thinking about, now that I've got most of the tree done, what else is going on here? Here in Awahi, we've got the smaller plants growing up to create the rest of the forest. I'm putting in some of those, and I see that there's that one halapepe there, different type of tree. It's a neat shape. Putting that in there. Just some little details. The tree is the focal point. Next, go over all of your beautiful lines with Sharpie. Obviously, I've sped up this footage. Don't go this fast. Take your time. Go over your lines and make them shine. Find all those incredible branches, all those fluffy and interesting leaves. Get the details down with Sharpie so that when you paint, they will stand out. Your artwork is going to be amazing. If you need more time for sharpening, and I bet you do, you can always pause the video. And remember, when you have finished sharpening, erase the whole picture. Okay, there we go. Now let's get set up for painting. Make sure that your technology is out of the way of the water, and have your napkin, your water, your paint, and your brush. Wet your brush and give it a hug. Make sure it has a nice tip on it. We want to take care of our brushes and always have a nice tip on them. Hold your brush like a pencil and hold it down by the middle part. That way you will have lots of control when you paint. When you paint, use just the tip of the brush. Touch the paper as lightly as possible. Let's start with the branches. I'm going to put some water on my brush and take some brown paint and practice using just the tip of my brush in my branches. No matter how skinny the branches are, keep that paint as much as you can inside. Do this by having your brush touch the paper with just the tip. But you know what else I'm going to do? Is I'm going to add other colors to the brown. Here I am adding orange to the brown. Sometimes I paint with brown, sometimes I add a little bit of orange to the paper, and that color mixing makes your tree unique. You can have it so that the colors flow from one to the next. It still looks brown, but it's a different brown, and I can add purple to the brown too. Try that somewhere else. That creates a shadowy brown. When you mix colors, then you make things look real, because there's so many colors in the world compared to the colors in your paints. Let's make this tree come to life by using different colors together. You can also have more water in your paint, and that will make the colors lighter. Well, I have a lot of orange right there. Maybe that's too much orange. I'll put a little more brown in it. But I'm still controlling it. I don't have too much water. I don't have too much paint. And I'm using just the tip of my brush. That helps the paint go where I want it to go. It takes practice, but you can do it. And if you need to use your napkin to clean up a little area that's outside of what you were going for, you can, but don't use the napkin too much. Just keep going slow and putting the paint where you want it, and adding other colors to the brown too. Doesn't have to be all the colors. I'm just putting orange with the brown some places and purple with the brown other places, and it makes my tree look like the bark is just a little bit different in some spots than others. Just a little bit different, like the sunlight is touching the bark, and other places the bark is in shadow. That is making my tree come to life. I'm going to speed up the video here, but don't speed up your painting. If you need more time, just pause the video and then do more of the video when you need to. Next, I'm going to show how I do the leaves. I'm going to do a watercolor wash just in some parts of the leaves, and that's going to come out really amazing. See how here I am painting with water, only water, inside one of my parts of the leaves on the tree. So I put water on, and then watch this. I'm going to use yellow, wetting the yellow and dropping it in, and that yellow, oh, it's flowing around. Isn't that fun? And then I'm not even going to use green. I'm going to take some blue. I wet my blue and I dropped it in. And when I use yellow and blue to mix green instead of just using green, look how many different greens I get. Isn't that incredible? And so it's like the sunlight is touching the tree. Let's do that in another part. Again, water first. Everywhere the water goes, the paint will follow. So paint with the water carefully. Put it just where you want. Put the yellow where the sunlight would be hitting the tree. It will flow, but you can still decide where you want it, or where you want it to start anyways. But it will only go where the water went. And then drop in the blue. Oh, isn't that fun? Look at that flowing. Oh, yes. And then more blue if you want it darker. Oh, beautiful. So exciting. Yes, lots of fun there. And I think it needs a little bit more yellow in there. Just a touch. That is coming out wonderfully. Have you tried that on your tree yet? I'm going to speed up the film, but you keep going slow. But see, I'm just doing the same thing in all my other tufts of tree leaves. All of that canopy is having the yellow and the blue. I didn't even use any of the green paint. You could, but make sure that you use yellow and blue so that you have different types of green. Let those different colors happen by doing watercolor washes. Remember, where the water goes, the paint will flow. I'm going to do the same thing down here at the bottom. The plants, they're down on the ground. I'm dropping in the water first. Let's see what happens in that area. What beautiful colors. This time I've added more yellow, a little bit of blue, and a couple drops of orange, just the tiniest bit. And I stop and I look at the whole piece and I think, well, what else does it need? I think it needs the sky. I'm going to do a watercolor wash for the sky too. That means I'm filling the white areas with water, and I'm looking at it and thinking, where does it need darker blue and where does it need lighter blue? Now, one thing to think about is if your leaves were still really dry, wait before you do the sky. And then when you do the sky, use your palette to mix blue and water together, because you don't want the sky to be darker than the tree necessarily, unless maybe it's nighttime. I see how light a blue I can get there, and I added a little bit of purple in there too. That is such a light color because I'm mixing water with it before I put it on. And so when you mix water with the blue, it can be that light, just a little bit of color in the background, and wow, isn't that coming together? Here is your reflection question. In today's art project, we looked at the patterns found in trees, and then we used what we learned to draw and paint a kumu tree in Hawaii. Kumu is teacher. What is special about the tree that you drew and painted? What does your kumu tree want to teach all of us about taking care of the Aina? I can't wait to see your finished drawings and paintings. And so take a photo of them. Put them on Seesaw or Google Classroom so that I can sign in and see them. I'm starting to leave students comments, and that's my favorite thing, to see your art. Now, also, painting can be messy. Please wash and dry your brush. Put it away. Put everything else away and hang up your beautiful painting where your family can enjoy it. Okay, can't wait to make more art with you next time. Ahui ho! One last thing, artists. When I get to visit Hawaii, I don't only help plant trees, but I paint them as well. These kumu trees are so inspiring. I know that your paintings of them will inspire people as well.